Today, I'm sitting with Eric. Eric, what do you do on a day-to-day basis?
All right. Well, my day-to-day basis has changed a lot lately.
Uh-huh.
After spending more than 26 years in the military, I finally retired. So my day-to-day now is watching over my kids, getting them up in the morning, getting them off to school, and just trying to enjoy life and relax a little bit.
How is having kids? How is it being a father?
It's awesome.
Uh-huh.
It's interesting that we waited till later in life to have kids.
Yeah.
Most people have kids in their 20s. We're having kids in our 40s. But it's been great. It's We have a lot more time to spend with them than I think your average 20 something year old would, who's
Oh
just trying
yeah.
to get established, start their career, all those kind of things. Whereas we've finished our careers, so we have time just to spend with the kids, do a lot more traveling and a lot of fun stuff that I think a lot of families don't get to do. So we're incredibly fortunate and grateful for the opportunities that we've got.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. I'm definitely not gonna have kids until I'm a lot older. And the way I see it is you have to live your own life before you can make someone else's.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's funny because when I was younger, as opposed to a lot of people, I just didn't have interest in kids at the time because I
Uh-huh.
realized at the time I was a bit too selfish, probably to have kids. I think a lot of people probably have kids anyway, but I realized that I wanted to focus on my needs and my wants as well. You've got a lot more disposable income you can when it's just you or just you and someone else without the kids. So
Yeah.
yeah, I did a lot more taking advantage of being younger, but now being older, I get to focus more on the kids. Of course, the one drawback is I'm a lot more broken down than a lot of 20-year-olds. When I was in my 20s, probably closer to my prime, whereas now I'm starting to have all the issues that somebody get their 40s has, especially after a career in the military where all my joints are just a little rough. So
Yeah.
keeping up with them is going to be a little more challenging, but it's a lot of fun.
Totally. So let's start at your childhood. What was your childhood like?
Oh, let's see. Well, I grew up in New York, on Long Island, not too far outside the city. My father was a New York City cop, and I don't know. I loved living in New York. Like most New Yorkers, I believed we were at the center of the universe. That New York that's just where it is. That everybody wants to be there. Still believe that to a certain degree. But no, it was an interesting place to grow up. And
Yeah.
then when I was 14, my family moved down to Florida, down to South Florida. So I finished up high school, my last 3 years of high school down in South Florida, and that was an extreme change. But yeah, it was a good childhood. It was good growing up. I was never a good student. Um, Growing up. I was one of those who they always talked about a lot of potential, but just not living up to it. I didn't care for school. I was not a
Yeah.
good. It wasn't until later after I, left the house, joined the military, and then went back to school on my own that I focused and was able to really to spend my attention and my time well. And suddenly I found that I was a good student, but in high school and everything below, I was not.
What made you want to join the military?
Oh, that's a great question. It's funny because I never really considered joining the military growing up. My father was in the army. I mean, way far before I was born. Never stepped foot on a military base that I know of before joining the military, but it was during high school, during my junior, senior year, I can't remember what it was, that I started to explore the options because I was looking at colleges. And while I didn't have great grades, I had enough to get into a smaller college or community college. And I realized that I didn't want to go to school anymore. I wanted to get out and start living my life. I didn't want
Yeah.
to learn about what other people were doing. I wanted to uh, you know, start living a little bit myself. So I joined right out of high school at just 17 years old. I actually went to basic training before graduating high school. I had to get a special document signed off, not only by my parents, but my guidance counselor, who said, yes, Erick has met all requirements for high school graduation, but he doesn't have a diploma yet because it's not the 15th of June. And I was going to basic on the 13th of June. So when I was in basic training, or I was in basic training while all my friends were off at graduation and partying, and I was off at basic, but I never regret it for a second.
Hmm.
I thought I was going to go on for 4 years, ended up staying in for 26 years.
Nice.
I think most people who do end up staying never imagine that they'll stay as long as they do. Most people I think come in for a short tour, do their 4 years or whatever their initial term is, and they want to move on. And after just a few years, I fell in love with the lifestyle, and it was a lot. I think, yeah, there were very few times where I started looking to say, okay, do I really want to continue doing this? I mean, really, for the majority of my career, I knew that this is what I wanted to do.
Hmm. Why did you fall in love with the lifestyle? Give us like a daily schedule that you would follow.
While I was in the military,
Yeah, just like what made you fall in love with the lifestyle,
oh,
basically.
the lifestyle, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, for me, I mean, it's the military. I think all branches are this way, but certainly the Air Force is very much this way, where they put a lot of responsibility on you very early, very young. I was 17 years old, and immediately I was given a tremendous amount of responsibility, and I, it was in some ways terrifying, but in other ways it was just awesome. And it really started building my confidence, and it made me wanting more. And then also just the family. It's funny that the dynamic of family that you get in the military is something that you probably don't appreciate until you get out.
Hmm.
I was around it, for the majority of my life. So now I'm seeing certain things. I'm like, oh man, that's not like this on the outside. But yeah, the sense of family I had was great. And then what really locked it in for me was my first assignment was in Oklahoma, which is a place I never had been and probably never wanted to go, but it turned out to be a great place for me at that time in my life. But then after that, I went to Germany and spent a few
Hmm.
years in Germany, and being overseas was incredible. And then I did my first deployment while I was out there in Germany. I went to Africa, spent time in Ivory Coast, Mali, Ghana, Liberia. And it was at that point where I really fell in love with it. Just you never will be as important in your life as when you're deployed. I've just always
Hmm.
found that to be true. And I'm not to take away from family life, things like that. Certainly my family, that is where my heart is and everything like that. But career wise, when you are downrange, when you are out deployed, suddenly everything you do is just that much more important. It's not 9 to 5. You're just going in and going through the motions. Everything you do, every decision you make, is impacting the lives of yourself, your team, and then those that you're there working with. So just that feeling of importance. I mean, probably for the first time in my life, I thought of what I was doing is really important to not just myself. This is on a grander scale, and that's, I think, what I fell in love with.
I like that. That's a really good answer. That's a really good answer. I love that.
Thanks.
So, what were some of the things? What are your greatest memories, your greatest accomplishments of the military?
Oh, wow. That's really, really hard to put my finger on one or two particular things that I'm most proud of. I mean, it's a body of work, right? That you're
Hmm.
proud of. From some of the things early on, which were more personal in nature, where I was just realizing my own ability, my own strengths and weaknesses, and refining them over the course of a career. That was tremendously rewarding. On the other side, spending time, I spent a lot of my career helping people. And
Hmm.
it's funny because I never considered myself the type of person who would run out to help people. But I found it rewarding in so many ways, because not only it started off with me being proud of, hold on one second. Sorry.
No
What's up?
worries.
Okay, sorry about that.
No
All right,
worries.
where did I take it from? What were we talking about? We were talking about personal
Your
reward.
Yeah, your greatest achievements in the military.
Okay. So aside from the personal rewards, just I mean the fact that some of the work that I did was helping people on this amazing scale. I mean, I look back to, let's see, the first one that pops to mind was one of my deployments was off to Pakistan. It was after the earthquake in 2005, the October timeframe, and I was given 3 hours notice to deploy. And at the time, it was one of those, I got a phone call, don't know, can't tell you where you're going, but you need to be at the base in 3 hours, have all your stuff packed, you're taking off, don't know how long you're going for, can't really tell you anything more than that. And it was the first time in my career that I did something like that, and ended up, yeah, we were going to Pakistan to help them after this massive earthquake where they had something like, it was at least 70, 80,000 people died during this earthquake.
Wow.
And we went out there, and I was part of a team, a contingency response group that is brought in to help reopen the airfield and start getting the flow of supplies into an airfield. So it was a perfect match for this. So we went out there, and what had happened is the whole world saw this. They wanted to help, and the Pakistanis needed the help, but they had no way to facilitate all of this stuff coming in. So when their airfield, the airport was basically at a standstill because it was just getting bogged down with all this humanitarian material, but they had no way to move it not only around the airfield but getting it outside off the facility there. And so my team came in, and what we did was we reopened the airfield. We came in with these heavy duty forklifts, all that kind of stuff, and the know how. And we started moving everything around. And we're talking tons and tons of humanitarian supplies that we were able to get out to the people who needed it. And then I got to take a lot of helicopter missions around the country and see how the flow was working now. And it was incredible. And at the time, I mean, Pakistan is certainly a partner of the U.S., but specifically at that time, we didn't have a great relationship. It's always been tenuous, but it wasn't that great at the time. And what that did was not only were we able to help people, but we helped build up the relationship between the U.S. and Pakistan, and then some of the other partners in the area. I mean, we had, who was out there? The Iranians were out there, and they were trying to help. They had some of the same issues, and we had one incident in particular where the Iranian aircraft commander, he got out there. He came to the Pakistanis, and it's like, hey, I got this material I want to give to you. How do I get it off my plane? And the Pakistanis are like, we don't have any way to do that. And he turns to me. He's like, "Look, I got to get this off the plane. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to fly back to Iran with it. And obviously, that's not gonna go well."
Mm-hmm.
So he said, "You know what? The Americans. Talk to the Americans." And he ended up coming into our tent. And my boss was absolutely awesome. Didn't think twice about it. Went out, and we were able to get the gear off the aircraft, get it to the Pakistani people, and help some people. And it was incredibly rewarding to see immediately how much assistance that we were providing and how it was helping the people. I mean, I have no doubt that we saved, thousands of lives, which
Oh
was
yeah, totally.
absolutely awesome. So, like I said, it's hard to narrow it down. That's just one that I can
Yeah,
think of. Of course, I spent
totally.
a year in Afghanistan building roads and schools, clinics, hospitals, government centers, and helping to educate their civic leaders or their leaders, and give them a little bit of civics lessons and teach them a little bit about democracy, which
Yeah.
we do those things because it's important for them to understand where we're coming from, but we know also that they're not necessarily going to take it and just go, okay, yeah, American democracy right here, we're going to go ahead and do
Yeah.
this. But it gives them an idea of what it's supposed to look like. Obviously, it's going to take them some time to get there.
I gotta ask you this. I was gonna ask you this later, but I gotta know. It's like, what do you think of the current state of our world? Because I feel like, and I could be totally wrong, but I feel like that you don't see that anymore. You don't see us, putting our neck on the line to help people just cause to help people. I feel like nowadays we're a lot of, not everyone, but a lot of people are just so selfish and so greedy and just in their own world, and they just don't even not even they just don't even think to go out of their way to help some people like that. What do you think of that? What do you think of the current state of the world?
It's hard to say. I don't know. I will tell you that one thing that I heard, and maybe this relates, maybe it doesn't, but like when I was young in the military, and not even in the military, just in general, people always talk about, kids these days, right?
Yeah.
Back in my day, this. And one thing I've noticed throughout my life, throughout my career, is it's all relative, right? It will always be that way. Because the same things that people said about me when I was young, they're saying about young people today.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if the world is changing so much. People's perspectives are certainly changing because they're at different points in their life. And people are, just me generalizing, but generalizing that people are generally not good at understanding perspectives and not understanding their own perspective. The lens through which we look at the world is so important to understand these things. And people, I think you're right there, where people are, I don't know if selfish is the right word, but they have a difficulty seeing beyond their own mindset, right? The way that the lens
Yeah.
that colors the world for them. I would say that my lens is it's broader than a lot of people. I've spent a lot of
Totally.
time in a lot of different countries around the world, and had an opportunity to see the different perspectives
Hmm.
and learn about them and learn how they became where they are and how learn about where they're going. So I don't know if I necessarily think that things are getting worse. I think that it's a challenging time. I think the fact that we have the one thing that has changed is communication, right? We never had
Yeah.
this level of communication. This and access to communication from so many different people, not only to listen, to absorb, but to also press out their messages. And that's where things are getting confusing. And I think that's probably the unique thing. I don't think people have changed. I think the communication has changed, which is changing the world.
Totally. Yeah, that you nailed it. I love that. And I gotta ask you this too. So, what do you think of the current state of Afghanistan? As someone that's spent time
You
and
know,
I'd like to hear your story of Afghanistan and what you went through too. But so, what do you think of the current state of it right now?
I think it's I think the state in Afghanistan is unfortunate. I don't think it's a surprise though.
Yeah.
Um, I would say that anybody who spent any real time with the Afghan people and their government and the leadership had to expect what's currently going on. The fact that the Taliban have very quickly retaken power in Afghanistan is not a surprise.
I can hear you. Sorry.
Yeah, it's not a surprise. I will tell you that my experience with the government leaders out there was very disappointing. Not again, I'm just talking with the leadership, talking with the about the average people, the average Afghan. I actually had great conversations with them. I thought they were a great people, great culture, but the leadership I found to be incredibly corrupt. So I I'm not surprised that the government fell as fast as it did. I'm also not surprised that the Taliban is the organization that went to fill that void. Um, I think that I think that American culture, not even American, Western culture, right, is very different, and we don't understand. We keep on trying to look at things. I mentioned before lenses and perspectives. We try to look at Afghanistan through an American perspective, an American lens, and we think about, oh, it's horrible that women don't have equal rights in Afghanistan. And the truth of the matter is, if you look at the majority of countries in that area, even our allies, our partners, very few of them have very good records on
Hmm.
human rights and women's rights, all those kind of things. So for us to be surprised that Afghanistan didn't continue on the path that we set it on, I think that's unrealistic. I think that the work that we did out there will have an impact. That there are people who grew up. I mean, heck, my first time in Afghanistan was 2007. So some of the kids that I worked with back then are, undoubtedly in leadership positions now, and hopefully I was able to influence them for the better uh, back then, and it will improve things. But it's not going to be a Western style democracy. They're at least, what, 100 years behind us, in terms of technology and evolution of their own government. Obviously, it's an area that's been in conflict for thousands of years. But as far as progressing toward where we're going, I remember speaking with a young man, probably a teenager, maybe early 20s in Afghanistan, and he was expressing some frustration with me that it was moving so slowly. That why our roads don't look like American roads? How come we don't have? And I'm like, what do you expect? I mean, we can't go beyond the natural order of evolution, right? Not evolution, that's not the right word. But I guess it would be of their government, of their
Mhm.
country. Um, I mean, they barely had roads out there, and we went in to bring them roads, but they wanted more. And it's going to
Mhm.
take time. And they also need to take responsibility for some of these things and doing it themselves. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not surprised. I'm a little disappointed, but it would be ingenuous for me to say that I expected it to just stay the way we left it. I
Yeah.
think that the Taliban, again, this is an American construct, right, or a Western construct. Taliban equals bad.
Yeah.
Uh, they don't see it that way. Straight up, I'll tell you, they don't see it that way. I spent, the year that I spent there working with in shuras, basically, the elders in meetings, talking to them. I can tell you that they don't see the Taliban the same way. I stopped using the term Taliban because I realized, again, perspective, that it wasn't helpful because it would kind of turn them off. So I started using the term criminals.
Mhm.
If criminal organizations are coming in here and trying to get you to hide weapons, that would be more relatable to them than calling it Taliban, because it's not necessarily only Taliban that were doing those things. There were
Yeah.
criminal organizations, and there are extremists within all organizations. So, but I digress. It really, what I realized is the average people that I was working with were great, nice people. They just care about their family. They don't want to be involved in any of this. I saw so many people living up way in the mountains in areas that not only could we not get there, the Taliban couldn't get there. I thought it was genius. These people are completely detached from the entire world. They get to live their lives, raise their families, and do everything they want in extreme circumstances, right? An extreme environment, but with no outside influence because nobody can get there. It was
Yeah.
fascinating to be, flying helicopters and see people that were above our helicopters, and that's where they lived in the
Yeah.
clouds.
That's super cool. There are probably some monks up there, some Buddhists meditating. So
I
let's talk about your time in Afghanistan. What was it like? Did you see combat? Did you lose any friends or anything? What was your experience?
so my time in Afghanistan was, it's probably the single most influential time in my life. Spent 15 months. I mean, it really is a 15-month period that we're talking about that started in January of 2007 when I went to Fort Bragg, where we all went for training. We were there for 3 months. There were 10 teams or 12 teams. I can't remember. I want to say it was 12 teams. That sounds right. And we went to Fort Bragg, Army base, our Army post, for 3 months. And we were trained up by those guys for this mission. And the training was far worse than the deployment would ever be, which,
What's
while
up?
you're in it, is miserable. But when you're actually out
She's not
there,
here right now. Sorry,
what's that? Oh,
Karen. Kind of. I'm sorry to.
darn, where was I talking about? Okay, I was talking about the training. Okay. So the training was far worse than the actual deployment in terms of physical, mental, all that kind of stuff. But it also did a good job of preparing us. When I actually got into country, it was say it was March of 2017, and I ended up staying there until March of 2018. And the deployment, I was part of what they call the provincial reconstruction team. The team was a little over 100 people. And what we did was we were responsible for two different provinces in Afghanistan. We spent pretty much every day running convoys, heavy convoys, armored, going into these two provinces and helping to build infrastructure for the Afghan people. And like I said before, also do a little bit of development on the part of their government to help them better serve their people and try to reinforce the democratic ideology. So it was really interesting. I spent time in different areas. I was on the main base of Bagram probably the majority of my time, but I also spent a few months forward deployed in some of the other locations. I spent something like 2 months at this one combat outpost where it was just me and about 50 other guys, very small, very remote, and very dangerous. And while we were out there, that was the first time I saw any combat. A few different instances of it. One, I mean, it's all crazy, kind of interesting stuff. It was the day before we had an Apache flying a mission nearby, and they saw a lookout tower on the mountain that was adjacent to our base that was looking into the base, and we basically they fired up, they blew up this outpost. And we decided that we wanted to go ahead and climb the mountain to take a look at the remnants, do a little bit of what we call battle damage assessment, BDA. And I wanted to go along just to see in case there was any rebuilding that we needed to do on our parts, if there was any civilian structures. But we were pretty confident that it was all hostile forces that had developed that. Anyway, while we were climbing up this mountain, about halfway up the mountain, we start taking fire from below. And I look down and you just have an arc all the way around the mountain of muzzle flashes. So it was something else.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, 1 second. Come here.
Man, we're just getting interrupted today.
Yeah, no kidding. All right. So yeah, I mean that was my first combat experience. There are a few others. Some I was in vehicles. I had to come out of the vehicle. We had vehicles go down. But I was very, very fortunate that nobody on my team was injured. We certainly had some of our partners get injured. The Afghan partners, we worked closely with the Afghan National Police and the Afghan Army, Afghan National Army, and they did not have the same level of armor that we did, and they certainly didn't have the same level of training. So they were, I would say, in more risk, and we did have some of our partners get hurt. But I was always proud of the fact that regardless of what who somebody was, they got the same access to medical care as we did. If one of our Afghan partners was injured, we would call in for air support and we'd get them medevaced back. And it was really impressive how quickly and that we get out there, off the battlefield, and how well people did. It's amazing the difference between, let's say, Afghanistan and Vietnam as far as people succumbing to injuries. We've learned so much through the years. But yeah, it was really a fascinating experience that had its ups, had its downs. But I'm glad I did it. But it absolutely changed the person I am.
Totally. Did you lose any friends in the war or anything like that?
Nobody that was out with me. I mean, I know people who were lost. Our team fortunately came through it completely intact. We didn't lose anybody. The next team that came in did have casualties. They did lose. They lost the commander, in fact. There was constant risk, but it's one of the things that I thought was, again, just fascinating observation of life, is that it's all relative, right? I remember when I first heard of, like, let's talk about, World War II and how people go off to war for a year or more. And I remember hearing that going, that is amazing. How does somebody even survive something like that? Um, and then I went and did that and realized, like I said, it's all relative.
Yeah.
I think that we as human beings are just amazingly versatile. When you go out and you see the way that certain people live, or things now, right? I watch my kids or I watch things that I think, and I'm like, wow, this is just the worst thing ever. And then you take a
Yeah.
step back, you're like, well, that's silly. That's not the worst thing ever. And I watch people in society doing, well, this is the worst thing ever. And then when I was in like Afghanistan or Africa, I'm looking at what some of those people are going through. And I'm like, okay, that is far worse. And they're happy. So it's
Yeah.
it's
Totally.
all completely relative to your position. We
Oh
can do
man.
a lot of,
Yeah.
and
Sorry.
it depends on what you've dealt with in the past, where you are at the time, and you'll come through it. You just have to have a degree of flexibility, right?
Yeah, I love that topic because it's so true. It's so true. It is crazy that I see people my age, and as sad as it is, they kill themselves, and it's like, holy fuck, dude. Like, you like not to like make fun of anyone or make fun of the subject or anything like that, but like that is so crazy to like you lived in a small town, and you got to that station where people in Africa can't even drink water, you know? Or the example I always think of is the Holocaust and Auschwitz. That's to me like that's pretty far up there on the worst thing that's ever happened in the history of time is the Holocaust and Auschwitz. You know, people were pretty much taken away of everything, even their hair, and not all of them, but some of them would still make jokes. They would still keep that little bit of happiness. They can, laughter, I guess I would say, not happiness, but laughter. And same thing you said is people in Africa, can't even have drinking water, but when they get, you know, a deer for dinner or a jackalope, I guess, whatever it is, it's the best day of their lives, you know? But, in our Western society, we compare the thing it is with the phones, is with our phones and social media and how much we compare ourselves to other people and how much of a competition our world is now that it just goes straight to the heads at for someone like my age. It is such a vulnerable age to have that sense of competition, in the sense of you got to be doing better. You can be doing a lot better, and it gets to people and it ruins their lives.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's just I don't know. I thought it was just fascinating because it was one of the things I noticed early in life, right? Not early in life, sorry, early in my military career. My first time really with different cultures actually was going to Oklahoma. When I lived in Oklahoma, I was there for 2 years, and I met people there who'd never been outside of the state. I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that. I also in basic training, I met people who had never spoken with a black person before, and
Wow.
I grew up in New York, where it's probably as diverse as it's going to come, and within the U.S. at least. And I couldn't imagine somebody growing up in the United States who had never spoken with a black person. And it wasn't a racist thing; it was just where they grew up. It's that's how the demographics
It's
work.
just a fact. It's not racist at all. It's literally just a fact
It's
of how
just
it is.
it's just a fact. And I started noticing those things early in my career, and it was one of those things that it just kept on coming back. And I would try to look at things through that lens of how it's just so different. Um, Africa, well, actually, a lot of the places I've gone that people would probably say are pretty miserable places, I've always found beauty in. I think my expectations were always pretty low because when you go
Hmm.
to certain places, I mean, Afghanistan,
Yeah.
I don't think many people probably think of Afghanistan and think of a beautiful country. I thought it was gorgeous. There
Hmm.
were places that I went that, oh my gosh, absolutely beautiful places that I would want land. I told them, and the Afghan people love to hear it. So I would tell more people about it because it's absolutely true that I could absolutely see when the war is done, when the area is safe once again, that it would be huge for ecotourism. That yeah, which is huge right now. People who
Mm-hmm.
want to come out and just wander the mountains. I mean, look at the number of people who like do the Appalachian Trail or something like that. Afghanistan is gorgeous. It's got these beautiful cliffs, these great valleys. It's just
Mm-hmm.
really, really unique terrain. And I always enjoyed getting out. And I mean, again, the second firefight I was in, and I'm in a vehicle. We're taking fire from the right side. I'm pressed up against the bulletproof glass, calling up to the gunner on where the enemy positions are, and a butterfly passes by,
Wow.
and I noticed the butterfly, and
Yeah.
I mean it's a split. It's a hundredth of a tenth of a second, something like that, and I recognized it and recognized the beauty of it, and then I went back to war. It's there's beauty everywhere if you're open to it. I think a lot of people are just too closed off. They see what they want to see. They see what they expect to see, and I
Mm.
feel bad for those people.
I like that. You can even, yes, you can take that and apply that to fear. You
Mhm.
know, I totally love the concept of fear. I guess not love the, that's a weird way of saying it. I just think, me included, I think our society is being fed fear 24/7 and being just like controlled by fear, not going out and doing what you really want to do from the sole purpose of fear, you know? And I don't really know where I was going with that, but like
Well,
I
no,
said,
you're
this is
absolutely
early
right.
for me.
I think
Uh-huh.
I hate to say it, but I think a lot of people though they're looking for the fear,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
totally.
if you look at TV shows, if you look at what sells, I mean, we started with Fear Factor, right? Way back,
Yeah,
people
totally.
are looking for that kind of thing. They want what safe danger, right? Watch somebody else do it, or
Yeah.
watching TV and watching the news. People who are just glued to the news and are so afraid to do anything that they do nothing. So great, you're healthy, but is this really the way that you want to live your life?
You're not, I like to say you're not living, you're just existing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly right. And that's it's kind of one of the things I realized in my life as well, that I started, for me, fear has always been a an opportunity, a way to get better. Because
Hmm.
my job, and I should mention that my initial job going into the military, going into the Air Force, was as a military journalist. Um, I was never a writer. I was not. I worked in. I did TV production in high school, but writing was not a strong suit for me. And I speaking in public was also something. I was one of those people that I wouldn't say that I was more afraid of speaking in public than death, like a lot of people are,
Yeah.
but it was never something I was comfortable with. But I would pursue the fear. So if something was scared me, I would say yes. So I remember my first boss asked if I would be willing to do the newcomer briefings. So whenever we had, I think it was once a month, we got all the newcomers to the base together and we'd do some briefings to teach them about certain things. We'd have the various people come in to give briefings, and I would give the briefing for my office, the public affairs office. And it was terrifying, and I was terrible at it. But I got better at it. And every time I'd give a briefing, I get better and better. And I did it throughout my career to the point that I got to a point and it was commonplace. And by the end, I mean, some of the presentations I was giving were to hundreds, literally hundreds of people. My last job, I was a commander of a training squadron, and I had up to 500 students at a time and 100 staff members, and I would bring them all in and give big presentations and wouldn't think twice about it. In fact, the adrenaline would get me going, and that was all from fear. That if I'd
Hmm.
never pursued the fear, I'd never get to the point where I'm comfortable in those things. So I think fear is absolutely essential, right? It's essential to our development.
Totally. You know, the thought I always keep in my mind, because it's so true, is the way to live. the key to life, the key to live a happy, what is it? Happy, healthy, and whole life is to not stay in a comfort zone, right?
Yeah.
Because that's when life just slips away, just like that. Because when you think about it, when you break it down, when you're from like being born to early adulthood, every single day is something new. Whether that's cursive on the playground in high school, taking geometry and then talking to that girl, whatever it is, every day you're doing something new. No matter what day it is, it's always new. You're always getting out of that comfort zone. But as you get out of high school, unless if you go off to the military or go to I would maybe college, whatever, if you don't do something new every day, time seems to slip away because that's what makes life living is learning new things and doing new things. That or the reason why I brought up the kids thing is because when you're a kid, life seems to go by take so long in high school and being a kid. It seems to take so long to go by, and then as I'm only 20, so I don't know if I can say this, but as you get older, as you become an adult, if you live a 9 to 5 life, your life's just going to slip away because every single day is the same. There's no diversity. There is no new geometry homework, no new girl to talk to or play on the recess big toy.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And I used to tell my students, if you're not, if you're not, if you're comfortable, if you're living in your comfort zone, you're not growing. It's just a fact.
Yeah.
You cannot grow in a comfort zone. It's the definition of growth, right? If you're staying where you are, you're not moving forward. And there are a lot of people who refuse to take themselves out of a comfort zone. And again, they're going to stagnate. They're going to be where they are, and they'll never realize it, unfortunately.
For like me, if I can bring myself into this equation, I've been in my comfort zone for far too long. I know I have. And something I'm realizing is I'm doing the same cycle I always do. Right? We all have our cycles with our emotions and personalities, and I keep doing mine over and over again. And I can recognize that and see that. And for me, I know I need to move on with my life, right? I need to move out of my small town. That's just that's what I see I have to do. But then the fear comes in and I don't know where to move. I don't know where to go. Why would I want to go there? Why would I want to move to Jacksonville? There's fucking the crime rate is double the nation's average. Why would I want to move there? And just stuff like that. There's 1,000 excuses not to do something.
Right. Yeah. Can you hold on one second? I hear my
Yeah.
Preston is screaming again.
No worries, no worries.
TV, I mean? Yeah.
So I guess we got what did you do after the Afghanistan? You said you were in the military for like 25 years.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, 26 years in total. I
26.
came in when I was in '94 and left in
Yeah.
2020.
Holy shit.
So yeah, Afghanistan was just a fraction. I mean, that I spent a year and a half in Afghanistan. 1 year from 2007 to 2008, and then I was back out there again in what was it like 2010, 2011, something like that. I was there for 6 months that time. But aside from that, I mean, I've traveled around the world. I mean, to do the quick run, I don't know if you want to do the quick rundown of assignments, but I mean, I've been assigned within the U.S.
How about what was your favorite country you've been to and why?
Oh, favorite country is tough.
Have you been to Iceland?
I've been to Iceland.
I want to go to
I was in
Iceland so
Iceland
bad.
for a couple days. So
Uh-huh.
actually, I don't know if you want to call it that. It was a fascinating story. I was on a trip back. We were coming from Washington State, flying back to Germany on a C-130, which is a cargo prop plane, and we did multiple stops on the way back. And one of the stops was in Iceland. We were there for not even 24 hours. They got us hotel rooms, but it was a time of year where it's light all day long or all night long. So
Yeah.
went out to a bar and spent the entire, however many hours it was at a bar. And it was just bizarre to go to a bar and it's daylight outside and come out
Yeah.
and it's daylight. It's just there's something wrong about it.
Totally. Well,
But
it's like sorry to interrupt you, but
yeah,
it's how our brains work.
yeah,
It's I was watching this video about sleep and the reason why as fucked up as our world is already, one of the other things is how much sleep our generation is not getting is because
yeah,
we're staring at screens before we go to bed. And when our brain sees light, doesn't matter what light it is, you can't fall asleep because it doesn't produce whenever it's dark, your brain starts to produce chemicals that make you fall asleep. But since we're always constantly staring at our screens, our brains won't do that properly, and so we don't get as much sleep.
yeah.
Sorry, I had to throw
But
that in
yeah,
there.
no, it is. You're absolutely right. But yeah, the
Uh-huh.
two things I remember that specifically about Iceland that were unique was the light being up all the time, so coming out of the bar being really weird, and then the terrain where we were
Yeah.
going. We were going from the airport to wherever we were staying, and I remember the terrain being what I imagined the surface of the moon would be like. It was very
Oh
sharp,
yeah.
very
Yeah.
jagged. It was the kind of stuff that you look at and you're like, man, if I fell, I would get tore up. But so those are the two things that are memorable from Iceland. But I mean, let me think. Another one that I really, really enjoyed, and I didn't think I would, was Turkey. I
Okay.
loved Turkey. I thought Turkey was fascinating. Um, I thought it was amazing how much how much the Turkish people reminded me of the American people, which I don't
Mhm.
think a lot of people would think of that. We generally associate. I mean, if you're trying to generalize cultures, you would say most people say like the German or British are most similar to the US, to the Americans. And I agree with that. But when I looked at the Turkish, it was the only other place I have been that people show the same amount of pride for their
Mm.
country that Americans do.
Oh
And
yeah.
this is a generalized statement. Not everybody has pride in their country, but you see a lot of that within the U.S. And in Europe, you don't see a lot of, France is the best. I mean, it's just they don't do it culturally. They don't do it the way that we do it.
Yeah.
Turkey, Turkey does. If you go to Turkey, you're going to see Turkish flags everywhere. Like you see American flags flying on, when you go through a neighborhood, you see American flags. You don't see that anywhere else except for Turkey. Just my experience. I'm sure there are other
Yeah.
places, but Turkey's like that. Also, what else? They're also a society that wants to progress. They want to move
Uh-huh.
forward. Because I lived in Italy, and I was not a big fan of Italy. People talk about, oh, you lived in Italy? That must have been awesome. Italy was all right, but Italy, their culture is far too different for me. It's far too laid back. And
Mhm.
a lot of what they do it because it's the way they've always done it. They could progress, they could bring themselves further. They really don't have the desire to. And that's
Mhm.
okay. That's as a culture, that's how they're built. Whereas Turkey is very interested in progressing, in moving forward. Again, just generalizing, but it was my experience. I spent time in Ankara, and I was just, again, the capital. It was amazing how much construction is going on there. I mean, insane construction. I've never seen so many malls in one place as I've seen in Ankara. Who would ever think that?
Yeah,
So
right?
I enjoyed myself just because it was so much different than what I expected it to be. But as far as like other countries, like third world type, and it's I know it's now offensive to use the term third world, but countries that are not as far,
Everything's offensive.
right?
Everything you say is
It,
offensive, dog.
it is. Yeah, all of our terminology is changing all the time, and I
Uh-huh.
try to. Again, I don't want to offend, but so I try to stay neutral. But as far as those kind of countries go, the time I spent in Africa and the Middle East, I I really enjoyed Kenya. Kenya was gorgeous. Kenya was another just beautiful, beautiful country where it is the stereotypical, you go out to go on a safari, you see people like that. I don't know if it's like that now, but when I was there, you saw people in the airport wearing the George of the Jungle kind of gear, whatever.
Yeah.
Wearing that, I saw stuff in the airport. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me that people actually dress like, look, I got my safari hat on. I'm going into the jungle.
Yeah.
People did, but it was
Like
beautiful.
Jurassic Park.
Jurassic Park kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful country. You know, got to see various parts of it, got to spend some time close to the Somali border, and that was not as pretty, a little bit more dangerous,
I was gonna
but
say, probably a little scary.
but a lot of the country is absolutely beautiful. One of the more interesting stories I had was in Ethiopia. I thought Ethiopia was another gorgeous country with wonderful people who absolutely wanted to progress. The one thing that fascinated me about Ethiopia, or two things, was first of all, it's a very, very devout Christian country. Very
Mm.
Christian. I mean, not just a little way Christian country, to the point that when I was going through Addis Ababa, the capital, some of the graffiti on the side of buildings was religious in nature.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, no kidding. There were you know portraits of Jesus on the
Yeah.
side of buildings as graffiti. I've never seen anything like that. I didn't expect.
Yeah.
The other thing was the people were, again, this is when I was there, people were doing great. And
Mm-hmm.
I made friends with this one, he was a major in the Ethiopian army. And we were talking, and I felt comfortable. I got to the point where I felt comfortable saying, hey, just to let you know, I'm blown away by the people here and what I've seen. Because when I was growing up, all I know of Ethiopia is my parents telling me there are starving children in Ethiopia. That's why you have to eat all the food on your plate. And he just thought that was hilarious. He's like, there are
Yeah.
starving people in the US. I'm like, you're absolutely right. But at the time, again, growing up, when I was growing up, there was a crisis in Ethiopia. So that was like the go to country, starving people in Ethiopia. But yeah, they were doing really great. And again, just a great people. So it really is hard to pin down my favorite country, right? I can probably give you
Yeah.
least favorites, but that's probably not nice. So
Yeah. Well, let's go to the podcast questions.
okay.
Okay. So, what what is the point of birth? And what's before birth?
Man, obviously, I don't know.
Of course, no one does.
Anybody who says they do, I would be hesitant to talk to that person. But I don't know. Before birth, I do believe I'm not a devoutly religious person. There's not a specific religion that I prescribe to, but I would say that I am a spiritual person. I believe that there is absolutely connection. I've seen seen things throughout my life, my experiences that tell me that there is a connection, certainly between us, between people, and also between our environment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just there there's a beauty and magic about the world that I think is too complex to be random. That there is a force that we don't understand, and call it what you will, call it God, call it whatever. But I do believe in that. So before birth, I do believe that we do exist in some sense. I think I probably do believe that we spend numerous lives here, that we do come. I like the whole idea of an old soul. Again,
Yeah.
this is the thing, right? You've met too many people in your life that you get that feel that this is somebody who's been here before, right? Somebody, and then you have the other side. It's like this person is so incredibly naive that
Yeah.
there's no chance that they've ever done this before, and that's
That's
okay.
uh that's how I feel about Walmart. You go to Walmart, you see some people, and you're just like, holy shit.
So I believe that there is existence beyond this. I don't know what it looks like,
Mm-hmm.
and I also think that life is relative the same way that everything else is.
Mm-hmm.
Right, the point of life for me is probably the different than the point of life for somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
um, for me, it's always been about gathering experiences and just doing as much as I can. um, and later in life, it's become more about my kids
Mm-hmm.
and the enjoyment that I get out of them, and how I see my family in them, past generations. So yeah, it all changes over time.
Totally. So what do you think is, or so how come we're given birth, right? How come we're given the gift of life, but then have it all be taken away by death? And what's after death? What's the point of death? Is a better way of saying it.
Well, I think again, just to me, um, it can be taken away because it's just it's our current plane of existence, right? This is
Mhm.
where I currently am. However, if I die, I don't believe it's necessarily the end. But
Mhm.
to me, that's belief. So I'm not about to volunteer to say, okay, let's end this and see what's next. I'm going to live this to the fullest. I'm going to live every day to the fullest because I don't know what's coming next. But when it does come, I'd like to think that there is existence beyond this. That I'm not sure what that looks like. Um, I don't know if it's you get to see your friends, family, or if it's more personal. If death is just, I mean, one way of thinking about it, I've thought about this before, that in death it's personal, it's right here, and it's the collection of your life experiences that you get to live over and over again, right? How cool would that be if
Yeah.
death, it's basically you're rewarded by living a good life because you have more experiences to relive. Whereas somebody who is not as proud of their existence and the things they've done and the places they've been is not going to have as enjoyable of a, I don't want to say death, but moving on to wherever they go next because they have less experience to draw from. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's
No, I like that. Do you believe in the concept? I believe, before I say this, I believe in second chances when it comes to everything. But do you believe in the concept of heaven and hell? Not just like pure Christian Bible shit. Just the overall idea that you do good, you go to a quote unquote heaven. If you do bad, you go to a quote unquote hell.
I don't know. I don't know if I believe in a heaven and hell, but I do believe that there are consequences, certainly.
Mhm.
I believe there are consequences for our actions, whether it be outside forces, right? Let's say God or devil or whatever that's placing these consequences, right? Or enforcing the consequences, or it being internal. Like I said before, what if it's all me, right? What if each one of us it's individual? So I live a terrible life. I'm a terrible person, and when I die, I reflect on that for the rest of my existence. And
Mhm.
there is Preston.
No worries, no worries. It's okay.
Preston, can you go outside, please?
Maybe we should ask him the questions. Maybe he'll have a good answer.
Yeah. Um, so what we're saying, yeah, heaven and hell, and I think that the same goes for the other side. That your reward potentially could be internal. That you live a good life, you know you've lived a good life,
Mhm.
and where you go from that is getting to enjoy that life and enjoy the experiences and not have the regrets that somebody who lived a poor life, a miserable life, a miserable existence, who didn't care for anybody. You have to, let's say, potentially relive that and
Yeah,
have regrets of why couldn't I have been a better person. Um, I don't know. That's personally that's where I am right
I
now,
like that.
but
I
it
like that.
changes. It changes based on my experiences. But this is where I currently am.
So, like, with what you just said, what do you think deja vu is then?
Yeah. Well, I like the idea because I imagine most people experience forms of deja vu, right? I certainly have. I've certainly done the whole. I've been here before, and this is the next thing that's going to happen, and the next thing actually does happen.
Mhm.
I don't know. I think to me that would have to do with our connection, our overall connection, and the balance that we have with the environment and everything around us. Um, that maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's just something a chemical imbalance. I don't know what it is. I'd like to believe that that's what it is. It's
Mhm.
it's it's something having to do with our connection.
Totally. Well, like, so with this next question, uh, feel free to bring in some of the things you've experienced when it comes to, like, spiritual, you know, connections and whatnot.
Hold
you've
on one
experienced.
second. I'm going to push
Oh,
him back out.
no worries.
All right. Sorry about that. Hopefully, we're good for a little bit more.
No
Okay.
worries. Hey, at least he's not like, totally glued to his iPad. He wants to explore and see things.
He
That's a
does.
whole
He does.
that's a whole nother topic when it comes to,
Uh,
I don't know, just like technology and kids. But so like with every, the experience, the spiritual experiences you've had kind of just goes into this question too is do you have any alien or ghost stories?
Let me see. Alien stories, certainly. Actually, it used to be. I think we're starting to get back into the business, but there used to be an office dedicated to, looking at these alien reports of aliens and things like
Mhm.
that. Um, and when I first came in the military in the mid '90s, my first assignment was in Oklahoma, and I did once get a phone call. My office would take noise complaints, and so a alien calls was part of the collective noise complaints. So I
Mhm.
remember being very young and taking a call from a woman who was just absolutely, I don't know if I'd say terrified, but she was very upset that she had her son had experienced some kind of alien encounter, and she was telling me all about it. And I did the whole hold on and talk to my boss about what am I supposed to do. And
Yeah.
they said, no, okay, look, we don't have that office anymore. So the best you can do is talk to her and try to calm her down. And that's what I did. I spent a good amount of time on the phone with her and just hearing her story. And I don't even remember the story, but it was the typical, they were out in an open field. Something came, hovered above them, took off. We do things like we check our reports to see if we had any aircraft flying in the area or anything like that. And all I could tell her is, look, sorry, no aircraft were flying in that area, but there's nothing else I can do. So that's as close as it gets. I have not seen any aliens. I'm trying to think. There are always good stories of like ghosts, like where I went to my technical training, and part of my
Mhm.
technical training was because I was a journalist, was photography, and we learned old school processing film. So we were in dark rooms, and the place that we learned how to process film and make pictures, all that kind of stuff, was an old prison. So the cells, the dark rooms were the old cells. So
Yeah.
there were all these stories of, the prisoner who died in this cell, and that's your dark room now. Personally, I didn't see anything, but yeah.
That's cool. What about the spiritual stuff you experienced? Like, divine intervention or anything like that?
um, there are certainly things throughout my life that I've seen that you could say I had incredible luck, or you could say that there was some hand in what was going on. I mean, simple things like when I was in high school, I was in a very bad crash. Flipped my car 4 times off, getting
Oh,
off an
wow.
exit, going way too fast. Inexperienced driver, went end over end 4 times. Came out of it with a scratch, and I banged my head. Um, Easily could have died in that. I was in other vehicle accidents where I flipped and not a scratch. For me, some of the let me see, probably the more unique story I could share was when my brother died.
Mhm.
My brother died in his 20s, and it from a car accident. He was driving a motorcycle, was hit by a motor vehicle, and he died. And it was the night that it happened. When it happened, I mean, I was up in New Jersey at the time, and this happened in Florida. And the second it happened, I knew I couldn't breathe, I couldn't sleep. There was something wrong. I knew there was something wrong, and I couldn't, I couldn't, I couldn't get to sleep. And I
Mhm.
just remember laying there, going, "Something is not right." Something like I felt like there was a pressure on my heart, and I was a little panicked, and then eventually I calmed down, and it wasn't long after that I got the phone call that my brother had been in an accident and was in a coma. But it was one of those, like I said, I knew that when it happened, the connection was there.
Mm-hmm.
Also, one of the things I see is in nature, there's incredible connection between things that is beyond selective, you know, Darwinism and all that. Uh, Example, so I keep saltwater fish. I've kept aquariums for years and years, and I see things in the aquarium that is just fascinating to me. One of my favorites is the the cardinal fish and the long spine urchin. And the cardinal fish is basically the way that they breed is they call them mouth breeders, right? The male, let me see, the female lays the eggs. The male comes and fertilizes them, then picks them up in his mouth and keeps them in his mouth until they hatch. And when they come out, to ensure that they survive, he has to find a long spine urchin. And these are, you've seen them before, that they look like a black ball of spikes. And they have a relationship where they will swim right up to this urchin and deposit the babies, the fry, right in the urchin. And the babies know to stay in the urchin because the urchin, when the big fish come to try to eat it, will direct his spikes toward the big fish. So the only way that these fish survive is this relationship they have with the urchin. And there's so many different relationships like that in nature that it's like perfect puzzle pieces that intertwine exactly the way that they're supposed to. And a lot of people would chalk that up to, just over time. Again, the whole Darwinism, that whole concept. But I don't know. I think there's more than that. I think it's
Totally, totally.
this whole way that we all are tied together.
Yeah,
That's
well,
what I
just like with life too. I'll bring this up with when it applies to life too. So with that, it's like, when did that begin? You know, when was the first fish to start that? You
right.
know, and same thing with life in existence itself. It's like, okay, when did we start? You know, when did consciousness start? When was the first human to have consciousness? You know, when was the first, like, Adam and Eve, right? Those two people. Okay, who created Adam and Eve? It's like the philosophical question of what came first, the chicken or the egg?
Right.
You know, uh, there's never yesterday and there's never tomorrow. There's only today, right? When did today start? Right? It didn't start yesterday, or it's not going to start tomorrow. It's just today. You know, it's always been like that. We can't look back and pinpoint, oh, this is when today started. You know, unless if you believe in the Big Bang, that's for you. For me, at least, like, to me, the concept, and I've said this a lot. I'll say it probably on like every episode. It's like the concept of that we are just like monkeys on a rock floating through the vacuum of space and nothing matters and there's no point of existence. That just like makes far less sense than, God or Buddha or Satan or anyone you want to believe in. Like, to me, that makes more sense, that something created this. That makes way more like, not logical, but like it's more possible than everything just happened out of nowhere. Like, that's, to me, that's crazy. To me, that's crazy to believe that everything just happened out of nowhere. And like
Yeah.
you said, like, I can think of stuff, I'm only 20 years old, but I can look at stuff in my life and it's just like, that's so weird how that planned out. And with nature, I love that sea urchin example. That's so true. It's like those two things, like, they coexist together, and why? It's just that age-old question of why.
Right. I mean, and yeah, and it happens so many places. I mean, there are
Mhm.
so many places that the coexistence, the symbiotic relationship, it exists, and that makes us flourish. And there are
Mhm.
so many things that we're not aware of, I think, because, I don't know, we're not looking at it the same way, but that exists in us and exist with us and other societies, right? Let's not just say humankind, but let's say, I don't know. It's amazing. And anybody who claims to have the answers clearly doesn't, because there's no proof of any of this.
Right.
You mentioned aliens. While I've never experienced anything like this, I also think that it's incredibly naive to believe that there is no life beyond, Earth, beyond us. That if the universe, if this is all infinite, then there has to be more.
Mm.
It's just for whatever reason we haven't come into contact with it yet. I'm a sci-fi geek, and I love Star Trek, and I always like the idea that in the Next Generation they talk about the Prime Directive. The reason why you don't meet these other races is because we're not advanced enough yet. You have to get to a certain point before we can become part of that
Yeah.
society. So, I mean, if you need an excuse, there's actually a pretty good excuse built right into sci-fi.
Well, yeah, it's yeah, totally. And like Neil deGrasse Tyson says that's like, what do you do when you see an ant? You either step on it
Or
or
ignore it.
walk over it, right? You don't stop and try to talk to the ant, or like you may think about the ant and like, oh, what is it doing? But that's it. You don't try to communicate with the ant. And you ever heard of like the Fermi paradox?
No.
So like the Fermi paradox, it kind of goes against what you're saying, but I'm
Okay.
with you. I am with you. But it's like society has these staircases, right? These stairs in the infinite staircase of evolution, right? So first we got fire, and then we got weapons, and then agriculture, and then we jump up, jump up. Now we got medicine, and then technology, and then space travel. And you keep going, you keep going. At some point, there has to be you know a staircase that no society in the infinite realm of space has been able to conquer, right? Because where's all the aliens? If I'm not explaining it this well, yeah, it's like if aliens were real, where are they? You
Right.
know, maybe there was aliens, but they couldn't understand medicine, and our understanding right now of space travel is so limited. Like we can colonize our solar system, but that's about it. We
Yeah.
can't really go out into space. We can't go to Andromeda, and there's better videos explaining how the staircases work, but it's just basically like there's one staircase, there's one step where we either go extinct or we just can't do it. And all of the other aliens, alive or dead, are in the same boat. They can't get over this staircase, whatever that is.
Okay. Yeah. It's it's interesting. I think there's always great excuses for why we have not yet met a alien society. Um, but yeah, everyone is certainly entitled to their opinion. I don't know if I'll like. There's a question: will we in our lifetime ever see an alien? Who
Hmm.
knows? I mean, the generations before us, had this conversation as well. When is it going to happen, right?
Hmm.
Like I'm fascinated by the fact I things. It's funny what sticks in our minds and what doesn't.
Yeah, so
I remember
weird.
from grade school being told that the moon revolves around the Earth, and that when it does that, there is resistance, and that at some point in time, it will stop. That the
Hmm.
moon will stop revolving around the Earth because the two are working on each other, and it's going to happen. I mean, just like event, and that would be probably the end of life as we know it, certainly. But you can look at the other side, the sun. The
Hmm.
sun, a sun only has a finite amount of time, right? It's going to burn itself out. It's going to explode, whatever suns do. But there is a finite amount of time that we can exist. So how do you take that into effect where you think about what's the point of life? What's the point of us knowing? And is it religious? Is it God as the Bible tells us? And how does that jive with the fact that eventually life on this planet will end? It's
Hmm.
going to happen. There is no doubt that it's eventually going to happen as a matter of science, if that's what you believe. And yeah, and that's what I believe. So it's just fascinating to think about what does that mean. So does that mean that we will eventually move to another planet, or we'll just die out here, or somebody else will come visit us and we'll go with them? Who knows?
Yeah. Well, like back to the staircase problem, it is like we got to get over these humps, and the thought I'm thinking of right now is like I think right now our biggest problem in society is understanding, perspective, communication. It's the most ironic time to be alive because right now, as my 20-year-old opinion, we are the most connected, disconnected we've ever been, right? We're talking across the country right now, right? But on the other side of it, people fucking just hate each other. I'm sorry if
Yeah.
you don't like cursing, but people just straight up hate each other. And it's like it's crazy to think that. It's crazy like to me like it's crazy that people hate someone just cuz of the color of their skin. Like you don't even know him, right? You don't even know this person. He may be your best friend. He may love everything you love, but you just don't like him because of the color of his skin, right? And your religious beliefs, as in right now in Afghanistan, as my understanding is the whole reason the Taliban took over is because the government doesn't like their religious beliefs, and they took over the whole country to implement their religious beliefs. That might be wrong. I'm only 20, but it's just like stuff like that's so crazy. So I think the biggest staircase that we have to get over right now in our lifetime, it was just soon, is to understand each other and to realize that we're all truly one. Like you said, we're all on the planet as one, and eventually this is going to die, whether it's because of us with global warming or the sun blowing up, which it will eventually. It's naive to think that it won't. It will. And we have to put away our differences and become one and get the hell out of here. We got to get out of here. We got to keep going. We got to move on to the next planet soon because, current state of global warming, there's not a whole lot of time left.
Yeah, I think I agree with you,
Hmm.
but a little bit differently. I don't think we necessarily need to understand each other. I think we just need to be able to be okay with somebody not sharing our beliefs. I think that
Yeah.
that's really what it comes down to. It's a sense of tolerance. Because I mean, I see this. I'm sure you see this. We all see this in society right now. There are people who will not be your friend if you don't believe exactly what they believe.
Yeah.
Um, I see that. I see that where I am. That if I don't have the same political beliefs, I mean exactly the same political beliefs, then we can't be friends. And
Right.
I mean, and that's fine. That's certainly your prerogative. But to take it as far as an extreme emotion like hatred, which you're
Hmm.
absolutely right. There are people who hate simply because they don't share values. And
Hmm.
we're not even talking about the significant values, right? We're not talking about thou should not kill kind of values. We're talking about just our thoughts on. I mean, hell, if you look at religion, some of the differences in religion are just such minor things,
Hmm.
right? Um, these minor little things about who the actual prophet is, have been the source of huge divisions in religion that lead to war. And it's just, I think we should have progressed beyond this, right? It
Yeah.
made sense earlier on in mankind's existence, but we should have progressed beyond this. And somehow it feels like we're backsliding a little bit with
Yeah.
all the
Totally.
connection that you're talking about. And maybe we're backsliding because we were able to progress as societies when it was not individuals, it was a society being able to work together and move forward. But now we're at the individual level because every individual now has a voice, as in the past they did not. I
Hmm.
mean, clearly, by
Totally.
the fact of us having this communication and people being able to listen to what we have to say, that didn't exist,
Yeah.
not very long ago. So maybe we've taken a step back and we have to start evolving again as an overall global society with this new form of communication.
Yeah, it's straight up. I like that answer a lot because it's so true. Uh, it's gonna be, that's like the age old story of time. It's just gonna be, or human evolution, I say, not time. It's just one step forward, two steps back. We evolve, and then like, oh shit, okay, this is a little rocky. Now we have to stabilize it. Okay, we're good. All right, let's move on to the next thing. And like so you're totally right. Like you can look at the invention of the car, right? It's like, oh wow, we just got this amazing new technology, and it's evolving so much, and we're great. And now we stepped up, 50 years in the span of 10 years when it comes to evolving our culture. And now we know that, okay, now we're destroying the earth because of our cars. Okay, now it's getting a little stabilized. So now we found a solution somewhat. Okay, now we gotta make electric cars. Now that creates problems. Like, oh, okay, so how do we pay for these electric cars? People don't have enough money to buy these cars. Okay, let's make, you can just keep going on with any subject like that. That's just the classic story of humans. But to me, that's kind of the point. That is the point of the stuff in between, right? Is because if there wasn't anything like that, if there wasn't challenge, if there wasn't trial and error, life would be boring. Like, I don't know if you ever seen the movie Wall-E, but besides the point of, have you seen Wall-E?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, besides the point of like the global warming, like that's the whole point of the movie. The other side of it is like in that movie, the humans, they're fat, they're lazy, they don't have to do anything. None of them have any life purpose. They're simply just existing because they don't have problems. They don't have trial and error. They don't have anything to evolve with. They just get fed everything they need, and they just become nothing essentially.
Well, another movie would be The Matrix, right? The
Yes,
Matrix.
I just watched that. I love that movie.
They
Yes.
talked about that. The first Matrix was engineered to be perfect, and humans rejected it because our species requires conflict. I
Yes.
believe that's absolutely true. That without conflict, it would be boring. I mean, that you've got
Totally.
to have some kind of conflict, but it does need to progress, right? But
Yeah.
then on the other hand, these big things that happen that impact the whole global population. Like if we look at I don't know disease. I mean, we could look at the current pandemic, or we could look at previous ones. We could look at cholera, look at a bunch of things like that that wiped out huge numbers of the population. Maybe it was necessary, right? Maybe without that, it's a natural way of depopulating the globe slightly to help us. Who knows? Because if it is all connected, like we were
Hmm.
talking about before, it could be a response. I mean, again, there are so many great movies. That's why sci-fi is so great. And
Yeah.
as a retired Air Force guy, a retired airman, we love sci-fi because so much of the ideas of what we're currently doing in the Air Force, the military, came from sci-fi. It came from these ideas because you have to have the idea to be able to try to build it. But yeah, there's great things in sci-fi that you could draw
Oh
on.
yeah.
Yeah.
I love The Matrix. I just watched that. That's a really good movie because I didn't know that it had such deep backstory to it.
Oh yeah.
I truly thought it was just like uh just some movie about this guy, like this team that has superpowers, right? Like some secret agents, and like it's like, oh, okay, that's cool. And then I like watched it, and you have that whole like robots took over the earth, and everyone just lives in a pod. It's like, holy shit, that's crazy. Um, but I was gonna say
There is no.
something. I can't remember what I was gonna say about it. Um, Man, I can't remember what I was gonna say. So
Oh, but I mean, what we were talking about is, yeah, a perfect society doesn't work. There's got to be challenges that humans are built to have challenges. I would just hope
mhm.
that eventually we progress to a point where the challenges don't need to be so great, but maybe we're just born that way. Maybe that's just how
Yeah.
we're going to be. And there's going to be these major conflicts just as a way to help us balance our environment
Hmm.
and meaning overall environment. Maybe we do need to kill each other off every however many years just to ensure our continued existence.
That's
Maybe these
uh-huh.
plagues are necessary. Who knows? Again, hopefully one day we'll get the answer and we'll go, ah, Eric was right, or ah, he was
That's right.
wrong.
Well, that's you reminded me of what I was gonna say. You're totally
Okay.
right. Is I think something that our society needs to do is acknowledge that bad shit needs to happen. You know, it's or not needs to happen. Maybe that's a bad way of saying it, but it's going to happen. You know, and it's somewhat necessary, like you're saying, like a truth that no one, not no one, I shouldn't say no one, but a pill that's hard to swallow is that we are overpopulating the earth. It's just a fact. We are. We need to stop making life, right? That's our main purpose is to make life. That's what is the most instinct thing in our brain is to mate and make a baby. That's all. Like that's at the bare bones of like civilization and life, humans. That's it. And we almost have to not do that or come figure out a way to where we can keep doing that. Because right now, as it stands, it's like if we keep going down the path we're going with overpopulation, it's just making the world, it's just going to destroy the world, you know? Because like overpopulation leads to most of the problems. You got famine, and then more people leads to more global warming because you need more clothes, more coal, more oil, more food, more this, more, and it's just making a giant snowball. And that's just an interesting thought to think about is our main purpose in life right now, or our main purpose of life that we've had for, you know, the dawn of human is being like challenged, you know, is being told to not happen. You know, is that making sense?
Yeah. Well, no, you're right. We have to destroy to create, right? So
Yeah.
that's the other challenge. If you look at us, if you look at let's say Western society, if you look at Europe and the U.S. to get where we are technologically, we have had to destroy this planet. I mean, we
Yeah.
really think of the fossil fuels. Think of what we've done. Look at us 100 years ago, technology-wise, and look at where we are now. I mean, I saw. I don't know if you've seen it. There's a picture that shows, you know, the first aircraft, right, first flight, and then the first space flight, or the first people landing on the moon. The
Hmm.
difference in time between those two is only it's less than 50 years. In
Yeah.
less than 50 years, we took to the air and then landed on the freaking moon. Uh,
Yeah.
it's fascinating how fast, but we did a lot of destruction to the world to get there. But now this is the interesting thing, and we think about this is where you have to think of perspectives. Now the Western powers, the rich countries, are like, hey, you got to ease back on this damage that you're doing to the environment, that we're doing to our Earth,
Hmm.
and we're trying to apply that to developing countries. Well, that's not really fair. That's
Yeah.
basically like we got training. We all we got training wheels. We learned how to ride a bike, and now we're telling everybody take your training wheels off, even though everybody else is much younger than us. That's
Yeah.
not cool.
Hmm.
Now, I'm not sure what the right solution is. Do we just give them the technology and invest in these other countries so that they don't have to go through the development stages? Or do we allow them to develop and to pollute on a higher level than Western countries are allowed to pollute, just to allow them to balance their way out? We don't think of these things. I hear these arguments all the time, and it drives me crazy that we don't. Again, we think of it through the American lens or the Western lens, but we don't think of it from the the developing nation lens. That
Yeah.
if I were running that country and I was told by a rich country that I can't do the one thing that I can do to make money for my people and to provide for my people, I'd have to throw the bullshit flag. It's just going to happen.
Totally.
You,
Yeah.
we've got to provide equal opportunities for them to progress as well, or at least some opportunity for them to progress. So yeah, these are all things that we need to be able to understand. I think it does all relate, like you said earlier, back to communication and at least tolerance, if not understanding, tolerance of different points of view, and the fact that we are not the rulers of the world and we can't make decisions for everybody, that we need to allow people to make their own mistakes. I've had this discussion before. This one in college, it was in like a philosophy class, and my teacher was talking about how I think he was Indian, And Preston, go out there, please. There's water on the table, on the dinner table. All right. So I had this philosophy teacher when I was going for my undergrad, and he was, I want to say he was Indian, and I hope that's what the society is because it's going to be embarrassing if it's not. But wherever society came from, that when the eldest, like if a man died, the wife, they would burn the man, and the woman would jump on the fire and die with the wife, and it was just part of society. And then pretty sure it was Indian. And then the Brits came in and they saw it and said that is absolutely awful. You are going to stop doing that right now. And he, as an Indian man, was so grateful for this. And I asked the question, who were the Brits? Who is, to come in and tell them that their society was wrong? Yes, we understand from a Western perspective that is wrong, that's our experience, and that's our belief system. But is it really right for us to come in or anybody to come in and say, look, you're doing it wrong. This is barbaric what you're doing. I don't know. I don't know who can answer that question. I know that he was very upset that I had that question because he's like, what if it was your grandparents that had to kill themselves? I'm like, I'm not saying that. I'm just questioning, who is the moral authority? Who's to say that any particular society or culture is correct? Basically, in this case, they were the stronger society. Mm-hmm. They were the ones with the ability, the means to stop the other society. I don't know where I'm going with that either.
No, I love it. That's a really good thought. It's I've had that discussion on here before too. It's like, when you ask the question, okay, so why isn't life fair? How come you got to live in Afghanistan and, your brother died at 20? Why? That's fucked up. Why is life not fair? Well, who are you going to decide who do we choose to decide what's fair? Because your level of fairness is different from mine. Your perspectives, your lenses are different from mine. And so it's just kind of like, I don't know. It's just so funny to get really philosophical when it comes to life, and listen, in my opinion, because when you really break it down and you look at life, it's just nothing makes sense. There's no this is it. There is no all right, here it is, right here. You can always just keep thinking about why is life like that. Who is it? Like with that thing, with the story you brought up, the philosophical theorem of who is the British to come in and tell the Indian that their culture is wrong, right? There's never just that solid answer of, well, this is why, and I just think that's very fascinating of life, is you can truly go mad of thinking of why is there a why,
Right. It's fascinating too, because where are the limits of these things, right? We would say, from one perspective, we would say no society is ever right to come in and tell another society they're wrong. Mm-hmm. But then you bring up some extreme examples. What about female circumcision?
Nazi Germany.
It's basically mutilation.
Yeah.
And is it safe for us to say hurting somebody or killing somebody is never okay?
Yeah.
I mean, it's really tough. It's one of the questions I always have. Another one I want to kind of blow your mind a little bit about perspectives. And that's something I'd never thought of before I came in the military, because I gave the example before, you talk about World War II, what you're taught in school, and the idea that people would go off to war for a year, and how do you cope with something like that? But so when I was thinking through that, I always thought of who is it hardest on when somebody deploys in a family. Let's say it's just a man and a wife, right? And let's say that a man is the military member for this example. Who is a deployment harder on? Because you always hear about the sacrifice that the service member makes. They had to be away from their family for a year. But I would say in that example that it's the wife. It's the one who stays behind who has it harder than the person who goes off to war. War, no matter how awful it is still interesting. It's still
Yeah.
different. It's still something. Whereas, like when I went off for my various deployments, no matter where I was, it was different. So it was
Hmm.
exciting. It was something like that. It was hard. It was a challenge. But at the same time, I looked at it as a challenge. Whereas the person who's left behind has to continue their life, but now they continue it with something missing. So life continues
Yeah.
exactly as it was, but now
Yeah.
the person I care about most is gone. So
Yeah.
who has it harder? It's the person left behind. But it's something, it's a matter of perspective that you will never understand until you're actually in that position. And you're like, oh my gosh, you're absolutely right.
You're totally right. I love that. Something that's like somewhat like that is a song lyric I've heard, and it basically says like, when someone gets murdered, both families are affected. You know,
Absolutely.
someone gets murdered and the other one goes to jail. Like they're both affected.
Yeah.
And
And who's to say that, the family of the murderer did anything wrong? Let's
mhm.
say that person, I mean, whether you believe in nurture, nature, whatever, but that person was born evil, right? They did something awful, or something that was outside the control of the rest of the family. We very often rush to judge that family. That
Mhm.
family is hurting, yes, just as badly, like you said, as the family who lost somebody. They both lost somebody, and neither of them did anything wrong.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it's all a matter of perspective.
Totally, man. Life's crazy. Well, I've used a lot of your time, so one final question. Final question. And so you can hang out with your little boy is
Yeah.
what everything you've been through in life, everything that you've witnessed and seen and been through and whatnot, what advice would you give someone? Just any relative advice, really.
Yeah. It's all tied to kind of things I've said before. I mean, first of all, you got to make the most out of every experience. I was never this person. When I was young, I'm like you in some of the things that you said. I hated being young. I hated having to wait to get out and start experiencing life. I've always been one who's
Yeah.
wherever I am, I look into what's the next thing. And I realized probably a little bit late in life or later in life than I hoped that I would wished I would have, that you really the most important thing that you can do is to focus on where you are right now,
Hmm.
to whatever you're doing right now, to be the best at that. If you're a student, you be the best damn student you can. If you are, making podcasts, you're the best at what you can do right now, because not only will it make you, a better person, a better professional, it will offer rewards for the rest of your career, but also people who are looking for people to give opportunities to will see what you're doing and see somebody who cares about what they're doing. And if they care so much about this thing that's insignificant, then they're definitely going to care about when I give them more responsibility, something with more significance to it. So I always tell people you just want to be the best at whatever it is you're doing. And then the other side is the perspective, right? Try as best as you can not to understand somebody's perspective, but at least be open to the fact that there are other perspectives. It's not that
Hmm.
they're right or wrong, but they see the world through a different lens. Everybody does. And you need to do whatever you can to try to see it through a similar lens. It would help you to understand other people, and it's going to make you better at whatever it is that you're doing. Whether, again,
Yeah.
doesn't depend, it doesn't matter what it is. If you're fixing cars, if you're building planes, understanding perspective will always make you better at what you're doing.
Hmm. Yeah, it's and I don't know if you've read because Pat told me to listen to this book, and it's my favorite book. I've listened to it 5 times now. Is Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey, right?
Okay.
Did you check that one out?
Uh,
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. And like he goes to Africa and it's a big story, but he's talking to these African people and they're like having an argument about something and Matthew McConaughey butts in and shares his opinion and one of them that he was agreeing with butts in and yells at him and he says, "It is not about whether or not you agree with someone. It's about if you understand where they're coming from." You
yeah.
know? And that's totally true is we're as humans we just always want to argue, right? We want to be right. I always want to be right, you always, whatever it is, whatever who you are, but it's not about who's right or wrong. It's not about if you're green or blue or whatever. It's just understanding each other or seeing. I like what you said better. Seeing through that person's lens, that
Well,
person's perspectives.
I've got a great story that I can't let you go without telling this one because it
Okay,
kind of wraps into all of that. Um,
totally.
and this was another Afghanistan story. And one of the things I noticed, and they noticed this about me, was that I was just doing a better job of understanding perspectives. They didn't recognize that necessarily, the Army, but they recognized that the Afghan people really appreciated what I brought to the meetings and the discussions that we had. So they started putting me out there. Oh my gosh. Hold on one second. Preston, I need you to go outside. I'm going to be done in a minute. Okay. I need you to go out there. And I'll come back in the story. Go. Yeah, let me help him out. I'm almost done, but you got to go outside. You're being disruptive. Okay? I'm almost done. You play your right hand. Okay. I'll try to bring that in from a place that I can continue.
Just start over. I'll just cut that out and just start over.
Sure. So one of the functions that I ended up filling when I was in Afghanistan was kind of as a mediator and a representative, a spokesman, basically for the U.S. and coalition forces out there. They found that I had a knack for just being likable. I got along great with the Afghans, and I think a lot of it had to do with just my perspective taking, my helping and trying, doing the best I could to understand where somebody was coming from. So they would send me out on these missions where I would basically be the only representative speaking for the U.S. And we had these great conversations. But okay, so this one case, I was out on this small fire base in the middle of Afghanistan in a hostile area, and we had just opened. We moved from one base over to another one that was just a few hundred feet away, but we had more protection on this. The first one only had 3 walls, which when I first got in there, I'm like, how are we in a base that only has 3 walls in a hospital?
Yeah, right.
Now we had 4 walls, so this was awesome. But when we moved over, it took a lot of attention. Drew a lot of interest from the Afghan villagers who were in that area that, hey, the Americans have moved over. So we suddenly saw an influx of a lot of young military-age males gathering right around the perimeter of our little base. Remember, there's only 50 of us, and there are thousands of Afghans in this valley. We can't tell the difference between the good guys and the bad guys. And they're getting closer, and there's more and more people. And I see my team, or the team I was there to support, and they're getting really nervous. And I'm looking at it from their perspective, and their perspective is security. They're just thinking security. The leadership is thinking the security and safety of their team, and the younger guys are thinking the perimeter security. And that is their number, that's the top priorities right there. The people's security. I, on the other hand, am looking out at the crowd. I'm like, these people are not here. They're not trying to be hostile. They don't recognize that they're making us feel uncomfortable. And so I try to talk to my team about this, and I see that they're just not getting it. And then they start talking about bringing in, shooting smoke into crowds to disperse people. Sorry. So then they start talking about bringing smoke to disperse people in the crowds. And I just see this, and I'm like, this is going to go terribly wrong. I told them, I said, look, stand down, hold off, don't do anything. I'm going out there. So I grab my interpreter, and the two of us, and I go just very lightly armored. I only have a sidearm. I'm not going out to start a fight or anything like that. I make sure that they recognize I'm going out there just to have a conversation. I go out, I bring my interpreter, but I tell the gunner up top, I'm like, I'm going out there lightly armed. Keep an eye on me. Do not fire. And I go and I find the best thing to do is always you find the oldest guy in the crowd. Right. So I find the elders, I go up to him, and through my interpreter, I explain, I said, look, we are so excited to be here. We're so happy to have you here, but I need some help. And he's like, okay, what is it? And I explained, I said, having this many young people this close to the perimeter is making some of our security a little bit nervous. Can
Mhm.
you disperse this crowd? And then I'd love to have you and the other elders come out to the base so we can give you a tour and talk to you and build up our relationship.
Mhm.
And he said, absolutely no problem. He turns over, he reaches on the ground, he picks up a stick, not just a twig, a freaking stick, and he takes it and swings it at the young kids. And the kids see it and they book and they run. And within 30 seconds, that whole big crowd that we were nervous about had moved off the perimeter and had gone away. They dispersed the crowd, and it was all over. And it
Mhm.
cost us nothing. And if anything, it helped our reputation with the leaders, the Afghan leaders, because again, understanding the perspective, understanding that that leadership flows from the elders down the chain, and also understanding that yes, we're the new kids in town and they want to come out and see what we're doing. It doesn't necessarily mean we're being hostile. So it was just, I thought about it for a long time afterward about what if I wasn't there? What would have gone? I mean, there at worst, there could have been life lost on both sides.
Yeah.
At best, it would have going to damage relations between us and that village. And it's just a matter of simple taking perspective, understanding where people are coming from, and trying to bridge the gap. You don't need to agree, but you need to help people understand. And throughout my career, I've run into things like that. I'll give you one more just so you have another one, just in case.
Totally.
Uh,
Totally.
Going back further in the late 90s when we were dealing with everything that was going on in Kosovo and Milosevic and the atrocities that were going on out there. I was in Germany at the time. Milosevic is doing his thing, and the U.S. decides that they're going to send in some warplanes into the U.K. as a show of force. They bring in 6 B-52s, and everybody knows the B-52, big, ugly aircraft that carries big bombs. And we know it, the bad guys know it, so it's a great aircraft for a show of force. And my job was to go out there and get as much media as possible to cover the landing of these aircraft, to make a very visible sign to Milosevic that this is unacceptable and we are willing to act on this. And one of the reporters came up to me and said, "Hey, Eric, got a favor for you to ask of you. If these planes get the call to go out and do bombing missions, can you give me a call and let me know? Because I'd like to get footage of the aircraft taking off." And immediately I understand from his perspective. He is looking as a journalist to get good footage to go along with a story, which of course is going to be a major story if we drop bombs out there. But what he didn't understand was my perspective, our perspective, military perspective. So I had the conversation. I told him, I said, I completely understand, and I would want that imagery as well. But please understand this. If I contact you and allow you to get that imagery of the aircraft taking off, you go to air with that, the enemy is watching the footage as well. So
Mm-hmm.
you've got to understand that they know how long it takes a B-52 to get from RAF Fairford to wherever they're flying, how long it's going to take. They know approximately what the armament is. We'd basically be putting the lives of the crew and the mission at risk so you could get the footage. So while I understand why you want it, I'm not going to be able to let you know. And he completely understood at that point, and I never heard another word out of him. And it wasn't hostile in any way. It was just a matter of he had not been thinking of it from our perspective. And why would I risk the lives of our crews? So again, the majority, I think, of the problems in this world come from simple misunderstanding and just freaking try to understand where other people are coming
I love it. I think that is it, man. That's
from.
I love it. That was a great story. I think that is something I truly love to see is is when I, have an interaction with a stranger or just with my friends or anything, and you know it. You get that tingling in your head. When you both just enter the same level of understanding each other. You coexist with one another and realize that you both just understand each other. You see each other's perspectives. I love that. That is definitely one of the sweeter things in life for sure. Well,
What challenge?
uh-huh.
Oh, I was gonna
No,
say
you
one of
go.
the challenges I see with coexistence, and this is another one I had never thought about this because I've seen those bumper stickers, right? We've all seen the bumper stickers on the back of the car that says coexist and it's got all the different religious symbols.
Hmm.
Um, I always thought that was a great idea. I'm like, yeah, that's nice. That's a nice representation. Until I was talking to my boss, who was a devout Christian,
Hmm.
and she was explaining to me that the idea of peaceful coexistence, I shouldn't say it this way, but the idea that there are multiple paths to heaven was counter to her religion.
Hmm.
And I'd never thought of that, right? The idea that there is a heaven and there are multiple ways to get there,
Hmm.
from her perspective, that was offensive because she believes that there was only one way to get to heaven, and it's by following the steps laid out in her case in the Bible. The Bible tells you how to get to heaven. So
Yeah.
any other than that path is
Uh-huh.
was offensive to her. And again, so it's just not that I want her to believe what I believe, but now it's important for me to understand why, okay, where she's coming from. Now, I'm not
Hmm.
going to agree with it because I personally do believe there are multiple paths to whatever you want to call heaven. Um, but it was important for me to understand that she did not, right? So
Yes.
that informs how I'm going to have a conversation and a dialogue with her. Yeah, we're never going to agree on everything, but we should be able to at least coexist. And if you think I'm going to hell, I can live with that as long as it stays simply, hey, I like you. You're a great guy. Sorry, you're going to hell. Right? As long as she's not trying to
Yeah.
make you go to hell, we're good there.
Totally. Totally. I love that. I think that's the key to life. Um, I don't want to use any more time, so
Yeah,
if
sure.
uh, I appreciate the talk. It was really informative. I loved it. It was really good.
Yeah, no, glad
So,
to talk with you. Like you said,
um,
it's cool. We never got to do this when I was growing up with your dad. I mean,
yeah,
he lived on the West Coast. I was on the East Coast. We saw each other what, like half a dozen times growing up, and that was
yeah,
it. So the
totally.
technology allowing us to speak face to face like this is so cool.
It's crazy. It's crazy. What was I gonna say? You want to talk about the just like to so people listening to this can see just like a brief little summary of the documentary you're in or anything else that you've done you got out there that you want to share to the world to check out.
Sure. It's I think it's interesting because of my profession, because of the field that I worked in public affairs, public relations, and working in with the media in the media since the existence. I don't want to go quite far back, but think of it. I started in '94. So right
Yeah.
there at the beginning of the internet, that means that if you Google my name, you will find a body of work extending back over 20 years.
Mhm.
So it's always interesting if you want to look at some interesting stuff. If you Google my name, like I said, you'll find my IMDb
Oh yeah.
login where I was part of a documentary. I'm also included in a few books. I'm in the thank yous for helping to facilitate interviews and things like that. I've coolest thing I've been in media wise
Mhm.
is go onto YouTube and look for the 2007, so 2006 into 2007, Times Square, when they dropped the ball to take us into 2007 in Times Square,
Yeah.
I was the guy who pressed the button to get the ball dropping.
Nice.
No kidding. Look on it. You'll see there was a handful of us military people who were brought in and they wanted to recognize the military that year. And they brought us out there and I'm on stage with the mayor of New York with my hand on the fancy thing. And then when we're 1 minute out, we press it down and the ball starts falling. And yeah, you
Yeah.
go to YouTube and you're like, oh my gosh, that's Eric. And yeah, it was
I
just one
l-
of those right place at the right time kind of situations. And it's probably I've had my more than my fair share of the 15 minutes of fame, but that is probably the biggest thing I was ever involved
I love it. That's cool.
with.
That's cool. Well,
Yeah,
thank you for your time, sir.
absolutely.